Hey guys, welcome back. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled People story. My family has owned Maple Farm for over 150 years. It's been passed down from generation to generation ever since my great-great-grandfather first settled on the land and started farming it. I grew up on Maple Farm, watching my dad work the fields and tend to the animals. Some of my best childhood memories are of riding my bike along the dirt roads, playing in the old barn, and helping my mom in her vegetable garden. Even after I moved away for college and work, Maple Farm remained incredibly special to me. So when my dad called saying he was ready to retire and wanted to sign the deeds over to me, I was thrilled. My wife and I decided to move back to my hometown so I could take over the farm full-time. I looked forward to carrying on the family legacy. The first few months were great. I settled into the daily rhythms of farm life, milking the cows, planting and harvesting crops, maintaining fences and equipment. It felt good to immerse myself in this work that had been such an integral part of my upbringing. One Saturday morning, I was out in the north field baling hay when a police cruiser pulled up the long driveway. A young officer stepped out and approached me. "Morning, sir. I'm Officer Roberts," he said politely. "Are you the owner of this property?" I shut off the tractor and hopped down. "Yes, I am. Hunter Jensen. My family has owned this land for generations." "Well, that's the thing. According to city records, this property now belongs to the county. This land was purchased last year to create a new public park." I stared at him in disbelief. There must be some mistake. No one said anything to me about the county taking ownership. Officer Roberts shook his head. "I have the paperwork right here. This land was signed over and paid for back in June when the county approved the new park's budget." I tried to remain calm and rational, even as anger and confusion bubbled up inside me. "Let me see those records you mentioned." He handed me a folder. I flipped through and my heart sank. There on the deed transfer form was my dad's signature. The date showed it was signed shortly before he retired and moved to Florida. "I don't understand. Why would my father sell the land without consulting me?" I said more to myself than the officer. Roberts shrugged. "Beats me, but the county owns it now, fair and square. Even paid a good price from what I hear." I took a deep breath. "Officer, I can say with absolute certainty there has been a mistake. I have owned this property for 10 months. I have the deed transfer documents proving my father signed it over to me." "Is that so?" the officer said skeptically. "Yes, it is. If you come up to the house, I can provide the paperwork." He thought for a moment, then nodded. "All right, let's take a look." I parked the tractor and led Roberts up to the house. In my office, I pulled out the thick manila folder containing all of Maple Farm's records. I showed him the deed transfer document, notarized and officially filed with the county clerk's office. Roberts examined it carefully, double-checking the dates and signatures. He rifled through the rest of the paperwork. Years of tax documents, surveys, and records, all in my name. Finally, he let out a long sigh and removed his hat to scratch his head. "I'll be damned. I don't know how the county got this screwed up, but clearly you're right. This here is solid proof you own the land free and clear." I felt a huge sense of relief wash over me, but I also needed to know how this happened in the first place. Roberts radioed his supervisor at the county clerk's office to come out to the farm. She arrived within the hour, flustered and apologetic. After reviewing all the documents herself, she acknowledged the county had made a grave error in registering the sale of Maple Farm. Apparently my dad did initially express interest in selling to the county, but changed his mind shortly after. However, the clerk's office failed to properly document his withdrawal. They proceeded with the sale, completely overlooking the fact I had been granted ownership months earlier. The supervisor profusely apologized for the mix-up. She assured me they would get to the bottom of what went wrong and make sure the public record was corrected immediately to show I was the rightful owner. Over the following weeks, the county undertook a thorough internal investigation. Several clerks were disciplined for their negligence in checking facts. New protocols were established requiring secondary reviews and approval of all property transactions. They even sent me a very generous check to make up for the trouble and anxiety this fiasco had caused. I used that money to install a tall wrought iron gate at the head of the driveway. On it I posted a large wooden sign that read, "Private Property Maple Farm. Trespassers will be prosecuted." I also took the preventative step of filing a land rights protection order with the court. This legally bars the county from ever attempting to purchase Maple Farm without my express consent. While the whole ordeal rattled me at first, I'm thankful it got resolved relatively quickly. It could have turned into an outright battle over eminent domain, but thankfully the county officials were cooperative and eager to correct their blunder. They recognized and respected Maple Farm's long family heritage. My great-great-grandfather carved his legacy from the soil over a century ago, and I now have the peace of mind knowing that my family's farm will remain our private land for generations to come. No careless bureaucratic mistakes can take that away from us now. Maple Farm is home, and it always will be. The next one is a pro-revenge story. Background. Years ago I worked for a large bank in the UK. We all worked on the same floor and in the same department, but on different teams. I was just passing through on a secondment and saw the beginning of this revenge, but was filled in on the aftermath later. One of the teams was led by a woman named Sarah. Sarah was, by many measures, a good manager, but she had a blind spot. That blind spot was a woman named Helen. Now, when I was in my previous role, I interacted with Helen quite a bit, and she seemed friendly. However, when it came to actually working with her, she was a nightmare. She'd tattle, steal ideas and credit, and generally throw you under the bus at any opportunity. I'm not sure why Sarah always protected her, but it soon became a sore point for most people on the floor who had to deal with her. Enter Mike, who was the manager of a smaller team. Mike could be a bit difficult, but he was still professional and fun to work with. To give you an idea of his character, I found out I was being made redundant, and even though he wasn't my manager, he heard about it and booked time to help me with my CV and do interview practice. Shortly after, it was announced that Mike's smaller team was being dissolved, and the staff were either made redundant or moved to other teams. At the time of the cuts, the economy in the UK was in a bad state, and all the banks were looking for efficiencies. He was redeployed and took the vacant manager role under Sarah that Helen had been gunning for. To make matters worse, Helen now reported directly to him. Helen was furious and wasted no time in making her discontent known, as she felt entitled to the promotion. Unfortunately for her, Mike was wise to her. They had both joined the company around the same time, so he knew exactly what she was like. He had even had her blame him for her mistakes before. Even the projects she had received so much praise for had been the work of one of his staff members. So he started the process of documenting her poor work and attitude to manage her out of the business. However, Sarah would not allow it. Helen was a high performer in her eyes, and she wouldn't sign off on him getting rid of her. When I left the team, Mike was frustrated with her and wasn't sure what to do. The revenge. I met up with Mike a year later and he shared how he had solved the Helen problem with me because he knew all of the issues I had had with her. Since Sarah had his hands tied, his only other option to get Helen out of the team was for her to leave of her own accord. He couldn't oust her by making her life difficult, or she'd go to Sarah, so he went the other way. He sat through every performance meeting with her for the rest of the year, gritting his teeth and praising her. This justified him giving her a very high performance rating. He also used his own contacts to find roles in other teams at his grade, which he then talked up to Helen. These roles were specifically selected because they specialized in one of the things Helen claimed she was an expert at, but had very little real experience in. Basically roles where he knew she'd have the highest chance of failing. Eventually, she applied for one of these roles, and he spent several weeks coaching her for the interview. In the company at the time, the interviews were scored based on 3 main factors: performance rating in the current role, competency-based interview results, and relevant experience. He had done everything he could to make her shine in all 3. She took the promotion, and within 2 months, she had quit the bank. He knew she wasn't ready for the responsibility, didn't have the skills, and her poor work ethic would be exposed. Worst case, she'd get her act together, and he'd still look like the perfect manager to Sarah. The next one is a petty revenge story. I was in the shop the other day, and here, for whatever reason, folks can't understand the concept of one-way aisles and following arrows. Personally, I think it makes shopping much more efficient overall, not having to squeeze by people, but that's another thing. Heading up the baking aisle in my fruitless attempt to find yeast, I'm standing there looking at the once again empty shelf when I notice Karen, like the stereotypical Karen. She could be placed in the dictionary as the go-to example of a Karen, coming down the aisle from the wrong direction. Well, I was in a bad mood, had a rough day at work, so I casually took one step towards the middle of the aisle, conveniently right next to one of the one-way only arrows on the floor, and proceeded to take my sweet time looking at the adjacent flowers. Of course, Karen gets to me, and I hear a big huff. Apparently, using big girl words was too much. I ignored it and continued my examination of the flowers. Another louder huff, the sound only a true Karen could make. So I turned to face her and stared at her for 5 seconds of silence, looked down at the one-way sticker I was standing next to for another good 5 seconds, followed up with 5 more seconds of Karen's stare, and went back to the flowers. This was met with some choice words that, being a gentleman, I shan't repeat, but defeated, Karen turned her cart around and sulked away. Sadly, that filled up my Yardash can be a jerk to strangers quota for the month, if not the year, but it was worth it. The next one is a malicious compliance story. This happened about 5 years ago when I worked in a grocery store, so I might be paraphrasing a little since I don't remember exactly what was said. I'm going to talk about change in SEKKR, 1 SEK =, approximately $0.1. It was a quiet Saturday morning in the store. There weren't barely any customers in the store. I was just hanging around the mail checkout. In my country, you pick up parcels in big letters at your local grocery store since we don't have post offices anymore. Preparing parcels for return, stocking stamps, and envelopes while keeping an eye out for customers. We were understaffed that day. Usually at least 2 people were out in the store stocking shelves, helping customers, etc. One always answered calls from the checkout and opened the second checkout in case there were many customers. And the other one was supposed to be out in the store helping customers and being available in the mail checkout. But on this day, I was the only staff on the floor. It wasn't a big deal since the store was fairly quiet. I was just minding my own business and enjoying the quietness of the store. But then Karen appeared. I saw her slowly approach the mail checkout. She was one of the regulars, a grumpy, troublesome customer who acted like she hated the world and everyone in it. She was rude to staff, managers, and other customers, very demanding, always complained about the most ridiculous things. If I'm going to mention everything that was wrong about her, we'd be here all day. Simply put, when you saw her in the store, you knew that she had some issues on her mind. Karen came up to me, grumpy as usual, and started violently ringing the bell by the mail checkout, even though I was right there in front of her. And then the following conversation ensued. K. Hello, service please? Me. Yes, hi, what can I help you with? K. I want to buy a stamp. Me. Yes, do you want a stamp with a certain postage amount or a quantity stamp? I need to ask this because she didn't specify which kind of stamp she wanted. K. How am I supposed to know? You're the one working here. A regular stamp, how hard is it to understand? Me. Okay, so a quantity stamp is the letter under 50 grams? I did know that she probably wanted a quantity stamp, but still I have to ask. K. Yes, how hard is it to understand? I picked up a stamp and registered it in the checkout, as you do. Me. Yes, that would be 9 KR. Karen gives me a 10 KR coin, and I open the checkout box and see that we're out of 1 KR coins. In my head, I was like, oh, she's gonna make a fuss out of this. Me. I'm sorry, but we're out of 1 KR coins. Do you have another 1 KR? So I would get 11 KR and can give her a 2 KR coin back. K. But why? I want my 1 KR back. Nothing else. You need to go get more change. That's your job. You're just too lazy to go get me my change. I might sound like I was lazy, as she said, but for some context, all the extra cash was stored in a safe in a different building. In order to get more change, you would need to walk to the other end of the store, down to the basement, out to the street, around a corner, and go down another set of stairs, and there's the safe. The safe was also super annoying to open. The combination was long and tricky, and it had a timer, so if you didn't manage to get the combination right in a certain time, the safe would reset the combination, and you had to wait a minute before you could try again. I wasn't that used to open that safe since I rarely needed to open it. Some coworker would always do it, but I knew the combination. But since I wasn't used to putting it in, it would take some time. Like I got the wrong combination the first time, so I needed to wait and try again. Bear in mind that we were understaffed that day, so I didn't want to leave the store unsupervised just because some Karen wanted a 1KR coin when I even saw that she had more 1KR coins in her wallet. Me, explaining how inconvenient it is to get more change and that we're understaffed. Karen, unacceptable. I want my change. Now go get it, you lazy brat. Me, I'm sorry for the inconvenience, but if you work with me, we're gonna solve it. I noticed that you actually had 1KR coins in your wallet. She cut me off. Karen, why are you looking in my wallet? It's none of your business what I have in my wallet. Are you going to get me my change or not? I just hatched a plan. I'm gonna give her the exact change, just a 1KR coin. Me, oh, I'm so sorry. Yes, of course, I'm gonna get your exact change. The customer's always right, with my biggest service smile. You wait here. Karen, well, finally. So I walked through the store, out the back, down to the safe, struggled with the combination. Got it wrong twice. I did eventually get it open, so I took a tube of 1KR coins, a paper tube with 25 coins, and I opened it, took out 1 coin and put the rest of the tube in my pocket. I then proceeded to walk back to the store. I walked through the whole store while holding a single 1KR coin, arm extended right in front of my face, walking towards Karen by the mail checkout. A small line had formed behind Karen, and you could hear the line sigh when they saw me coming with a single 1KR coin. I gave the coin to Karen with a big smile and said, "Here's your change. I'm so sorry for the inconvenience." She looked at me dumbfounded and said, "Kay, thanks, but you didn't have to embarrass me in front of all the other customers. Worst customer service ever. I'm never coming back here ever again." Me, "Thank you. Have a nice day." She then left with a huff. After she had left, I picked up the 1KR coin tube out of my pocket and filled the cash box with the rest of the coins. How's that bad customer service? I did exactly what she told me to do. She wanted the change, and she got the change. But to be honest, what the duck is wrong with some people? A normal person would have just given me an extra 1KR coin if they had one, taken their 2KR coin and left. Or if they didn't have one, they would just say screw it. It's just 1KR. I would have said that. The next one is an entitled people story. I went to a supermarket yesterday. This place has a peculiar arrangement at the checkout. The trolley on one side of the conveyor, and you walk down the opposite side to pay. This place requires a membership card. So I had a shopping cart with maybe 12 items in it. I spotted an empty open checkout and approached it. There was a woman standing maybe 2 feet from it, with no trolley and no goods, facing away from the checkout and looking back into the store. I pushed my trolley into the space next to the conveyor and prepared to unload. Then I heard from behind me, "Excuse me." I turned around, and the said woman was angry that I had cut in line in front of her. I was initially confused as she had no goods at all and no shopping cart, so I explained that the checkout was empty. She was not interested and raised her voice from her first word. There was no polite request. She then tried to pull my shopping cart out of the bay. She was half my size, but I held on tight so she couldn't even budge it. She called me a retard in a loud voice, saying, "You're a retard." Here is where I may have been in the wrong. I did get worked up, and I did point my finger in her face in response. My autistic son, 24M, was with me, and her use of the R word multiple times in the same phrase had made me very angry and upset. Neither of us laid hands on each other at any time, except for her trying to move my trolley. Next, her husband arrived with their shopping cart, which had more items than mine. He was not happy with me either. She kept using the R word, maybe 4 times in total, and her husband was angry that I had pointed my finger in his wife's face, which he had seen as he approached. She claimed that as she had been standing there, 2 feet back from the start of the conveyor, with her membership card in her hand, her husband and trolley should go in front of my shopping cart. He tried to move the trolley around me, which didn't work, and by this time we were all yelling, myself included. He kept saying, "But I am with her," as if it meant he could get in front of me and my cart. I responded by telling him I was in front of him and he was behind me. I told him it's like trying to reserve a parking space by standing in it. To which he just said, "Do you see a car here?" Eventually, I turned my back to them and they moved to an adjoining cashier. The cashier was a bit stunned. A supervisor had arrived, and the cashier began to process my load of goods. I apologized to the supervisor and explained that the trolley bay had been empty. The supervisor said to me, "It's okay. It's like trying to reserve a parking space." Exactly, I said to her. The use of the R word had made me very angry and upset. I received dirty looks the whole time from the couple in the next checkout, along with a couple of snide comments such as, "You look like you're going to have a heart attack," and lastly, "Have a nice day." At the time, I was too upset and ignored them completely once I had been served. So maybe I was an a-hole for pointing my finger in her face. I was really mad at her and wasn't thinking straight. But she tried to intimidate and bully to get her way right from the start. And I was not going to submit. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you again tomorrow.